Hi, I'm Jonathan Roberts. This video is going to be a walkthrough of how to use the video editing application Screenflow, some of the basic features and some of the more advanced features. This is the program that I like to use for editing up student videos for virtual recitals and for putting together online tutorials. And this video I'm recording for you now is actually recorded inside Screenflow. So I'll show you some of the more basic features and then some of the more advanced features if you want to get fancy, either with your own tutorial videos or if you're putting together virtual recitals. This program is unfortunately only available on the Mac operating system, but for the price point, it's a tremendous value. It's only $129 to get the application, and then for life, every time they come out with a new version, a new update, it's only about $35 for updates, so it's quite the bargain. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in with Screenflow and start a new project. So the first thing you're going to do is go to New, and it gives you the option to do a new recording or a new document. So if you look at new recording, I can record simultaneously I can record my desktop screen, I can record video from either my built-in laptop camera, or I can switch to my webcam, which I have over my keyboard if I'm doing some kind of keyboard tutorial. I'll select where my audio is coming from, so I use an Apogee Duet interface, but if I wanted to switch it to the computer's microphone, I can, and I could also record the computer's audio all at the same time, which is really helpful for putting together, especially tutorial videos. I'm not going to go into this because I'm already doing a screen recording to make this for you, so I can't do two of those at once, but most of the features we're going to look into are going to be right here under New Document. So this is going to open up a blank document window, and here you're going to do your settings. You have your presets for some common video formats. I usually set mine to 1080 HD. That usually covers most of my needs, especially if I'm uploading something to YouTube. And then I'll need to select the frame rate. Excuse me. And if you're not super familiar with video, video still works digitally the same way it did before all of this technology stuff, where it's basically lots of frames moving quickly to create a moving image. So here you're going to select your frame rate. 30 is pretty standard for online videos, but if you're using a more high-end camera that records at a faster frame rate, which usually results in smoother pictures but a ton more memory, you may want to select 60, but when in doubt, just go to the video source that you're going to bring in. And when this is all set, you're just going to click this button here, and it pulls up your blank document window. So there are three main parts here. You're going to have this black screen here. This is basically your stage. Anything inside this black window is what your audience is going to see. And you can change this just by clicking this button here. This changes sort of the properties of what's called the canvas. And you can even change these settings to something that's not really a standard video size if for some reason you have some special needs, or you can change one of the presets to one of the more common dimensions. And when you're all set, and you can change the background color as well. So if I wanted white as my background for the stage, or green or orange, it's quite easy to do from there. So I'm just going to leave this as black. So this is the main area you're going to be looking at to see what your video looks like. And then down here at the bottom, this is your timeline. We'll get more into that once we start importing videos. And then over here on the right-hand side is going to be where we do a lot of our editing. So this is where a lot of the fancy bells and whistles come in. And I'm not going to walk through every single one because that would take a couple of hours, and I don't even know how necessarily every single thing works. But I'll walk you through how the basics work so that if you'd like to try this on your own, you can find what you're looking for very quickly. So to get started, I'm going to bring in some video clips that I already have here on my desktop. And it's just a couple of little recital videos that have already been featured on some of our virtual recitals. And all I need to do is take this from my desktop or my Finder and drag it into the timeline. And it's that easy to bring in video. And this little green thing, that's the audio waveform. And I'll go ahead and bring this other video in as well. and now we have 2 videos on the timeline. So the way to think of this timeline, so now we have 3 tracks. You want to think of it as almost like laying pieces of paper on top of each other. So when you have videos or images on the timeline, whatever's on the top is going to be what's on the top layer, and then whatever's underneath that is going to be the layer beneath it. So just to show you an example of that, right now I have the first video. Whoops. I'm going to position this so it fills up the whole thing. And all you need to do to reposition or resize videos is grab one of these handles and drag it. So I'm just going to fit it to the entire stage, which should be a perfect fit. If somebody records on an iPhone in the horizontal orientation, it should fit the screen perfectly with this setting. Now, if I put this second clip underneath, notice, I'm just going to turn the sound off just so you can see this. So I don't see that clip underneath at all. But now if I resize this top one, there's the bottom clip. And then if I change the positioning of these tracks, like say I take this bottom clip, put it up here, take the first clip, put it underneath. Now it's the opposite. Now this video is laying on top of the other one. So that's the extremely short version of how these tracks work in layers. And you can pull in videos, you can also pull in still images if that's something that you want to play around with. So now I'm going to turn the sound back on. And even if you only did this to bring in your videos, again, as you can see, this didn't take very long at all. This is an extremely user-friendly software, and it's very simple to use. And then as far as editing, say I don't want this beginning of the clip, it's just as simple as highlighting the video that you want and typing T, and then you can sort of snip it anywhere you want and move those pieces around. So say I wanted to snip it here, here, and here. I can drag these little clips and do whatever I want with them. Granted, I'm not going to do that, but I just wanted to show you that as an example. And just as an aside, if you do play around with this software and you find that things aren't behaving the way that you want it to, just come down on your timeline and make sure that the item that you're trying to edit is actually highlighted. So for example, if I'm trying to do something to this clip that I have highlighted here, but this is highlighted, I'm not going to be able to, well, it changes. Sometimes it'll detect what you're trying to do, but sometimes it just won't cooperate. When in doubt, just check what item you have highlighted, and you should be able to edit quite easily. So that's the basics of getting video in. And now as far as doing some fancier editing, we have these different modules here on this panel. So we have video, audio, which are pretty much the main ones that you're going to use, screen recording, annotations, text, and then your media bin. And there are some other ones that are a little further in depth than this tutorial go in, touch call out and video motion. But when in doubt about anything that you want to use, the Screenflow documentation is pretty easy to follow. You can either pull it up from here on the help screen, Screenflow help, or if you just Google Screenflow 9 user manual, it's pretty easy to find anything that you're looking for. So just to go through some of these actions, here in the video editing panel, I've got this first video highlighted. I'm not going to go through every single control, but here we can change the size. My preference is usually to just change the size with the handlebars like we just did a little while ago. And in the course of editing, this works a lot like Microsoft Word or a lot of other documents where if you want to undo something, you can just hit Command-Z, and to redo something, you can hit Command-Shift-Z. You can change the position around with these videos. Not that I'd see a reason to do it, but if you want to get creative, this changes the orientation sort of forwards and backwards, Y rotations more, it's just on a different axis, and then Z rotation. So there's a lot of room for creativity with the positioning of the videos. But again, keep in mind, all that's going to show up in the final export is what's inside this black staging area. So I'm going to undo all of those just by changing this to 0. You can also type in these values. I can change the opacity if I want it to be more see-through. And again, this is where you can get creative with some effects. Not that I would do this for real, but if I wanted to put the second clip underneath, I could have some of it show through because now this top one is see-through. Or actually, I'm going to put this on the bottom. Actually, I'm not sure if I got the desired effect, but I think you can tell that there's some room for creativity here with the video settings. Just going to change that back to 100%. You can create a reflection, which creates sort of a, you can't really see it in this video, but it's like a reflection below if you want to use that effect. Drop shadow. Color controls. Down here you can change these settings to do different effects to your videos or to touch them up if the lighting isn't so good. And then down here you have all kinds of video filters. If you're using a green screen, you can do chroma key. If you want to do blur, so on and so forth. So that's an overview of the video settings. One feature that I like to use a lot and that you might want to use to sort of spice up your videos is this action button. This essentially creates animations, and it's very, very easy to use. So say I want to animate this video, all I have to do is click action, and it creates this little yellow box here. So this is the sort of, I don't know what the official name for it, but it's basically an animation block of sorts. And if I drag the timeline to the end of it, I just position this wherever and however I want it to be at the end, and then Screenflow fills in this time in between with the animation to get it from point A to point B. So for example, say I want to resize this and change the orientation. All I have to do is drag the timeline to the end of this. I can resize this, and let's say I want to change it on this y-axis. Screenflow will take care of the rest. And you can also resize this animation. So if you want that same effect, but you want it to be faster, all you have to do is make it smaller by clicking and dragging. And that applies to any of these controls. If I wanted it to be more see-through by the time it gets to the end, it'll do that. It'll make that change as well. So I apologize if I'm repeating myself quite a bit, but there's a ton of room for creativity on this. And if you want to get rid of the animation, all you have to do is click this and hit delete. But anytime you see this action button right here, that will add an animation, whether it's for the video or for the audio or for text. So that is most of the video editing features. Now I want to move on to audio. Most of these settings are pretty basic. Volume, I don't think anything needs to be said more about that. You can mute the audio. Audio mix. Now this you may want to play around with if you've recorded in mono. So for example, like when I'm recording, I'm only recording through one input, and it shows up here with the number 1 for one input. And then here you can change the panning. So for example, for this video, when I export it, I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it to the middle so that it sounds like my voice is coming through the middle of your speakers. If I leave it to the default, then anybody who listens to it, it's going to sound like it's coming out to the left, or if you're wearing headphones, it's only going to come through the left side. So that's something that you might want to be aware of with the audio mix, depending on how the original audio was recorded. And then down here is effects. So you can add various effects of different spaces, and then you can apply the amount of filtering. So here you can apply some creativity as far as how you want the piece to sound, if you want to add another dimension to the music that wouldn't normally be possible even in a live setting. So just to show you that, let's say I change this to live hall or large hall. Oh, and by the way, that little percentage, you may have missed it. Whenever you add some sort of processing, that percentage just shows you how long Screenflow is taking before that's actually applied to what you're working with. Now there's a little bit of reverb applied. Now if I do this to 100%, adds much more of that effect. But add too much of it and it starts to sound pretty artificial, unless that's the intention that you want. Or you can apply just a little bit of it. So that's a very useful tool to take advantage of to give the illusion of different spaces. You can remove background noise, which is really helpful. This video is pretty good, but if you have one of those videos that has a lot of background hiss, clicking this will remove that. And you can play around with the amount of it. Usually if too much of it is applied, it'll not only remove the background hiss, but also remove part of the sound that you actually want to keep. So that's a setting that you'll want to play around with as well. And again, we have this very useful animation for audio. So for example, say I wanted the audio to start at 0 and to come in at 100%, I would just do this action. And again, I have this little animation window here. And if I just position this where I want it at the beginning, so say I do it at 0, and then it usually kind of predicts what you're going for, so, and then it'll animate, so to speak, and the volume will gradually raise to 100%. And you can see this percentage gradually increasing as that animation goes. So that's the majority of the features of the audio. And again, you'll want to keep track of which clips you have selected, because it will only apply to the clip that's selected. It will not apply to the entire track. And the next useful thing that you'll probably want to take advantage of is text. So this is if you want to add any kind of text to your videos, and it's just as simple as clicking this plus button. You just position the timeline where you want it and click the plus button, and now I have some text options. I'll just make up some text. And you can position this text wherever you want it in the video, and these little guidelines appear to show you if you're centered or off-center or whatever. And then if I want to sort of tweak where it is on the timeline, I can just click and drag. If I want to make it bigger or smaller, I can do that. And this has some similar options. Some of these little modules, keep in mind, there's a little bit of crossover. So even though I produced this in text, if I want to play around with the orientation, I can go into video and I can change the rotation around the axis just like I did with video. So you may want to experiment between the different modules here on the I'm not even sure what this panel's called. I'll just call it the editing panel for lack of a better term. So under the text options, there's some different options for if you want the backdrop, you can get rid of that very easily. There are some other animation options, outlines, you can change the color, you can change the alignment, you can change the font. The sizes are preset. That's one tiny drawback of this. As it gets larger, the increments get bigger. So if you have 96, 114, and 288, if you want something in between those, that's kind of difficult. But all the same, if you have a size that you really, really need, you can always put it together in another program, do a screenshot or something, and bring it in as an image. So there are workarounds for that. So that is the text module. Annotations, this is more, if you're doing tutorial type things, if you need to basically sort of write something in the video or on the image that you're taking a video of. So like, let's say I want to draw an arrow. I'll just click the plus button here, and you select which of these shapes that you want to draw. So you can do a circle, you can do sort of a free-form drawing, empty square, filled in square. I'm just going to do a line. So say I want to draw a line, just click and drag. And down here I can set the endpoints. So if I want to create an arrow, usually I have to play around to figure out which end is which. I now have an arrow that will appear at that point in the video. And it seems my video, when I got rid of the animation, it turned down the volume all the way. So I'm just going to add that back in. So I now have an annotation with an arrow there. So that's another option, especially if you're doing tutorials or if you're doing a screen recording. And speaking of screen recordings, I can't really show you this because I'm doing a screen recording right now. But if you took a screen recording on your computer and you want to edit some of the items there, for example, whether you want your mouse pointer to show, or if you want to have a click effect. So for example, this little red radar effect, this is something that I set up here in editing. And you don't need to do that before you do the screen recording. You can do all of it after, which is pretty cool. And again, you can customize all of the effects. For example, for the click, I can decide how long I want that little radar effect to be, how much blur, what color. Most of these things are quite customizable. And the final item on here is the media bin. So whenever you pull something into Screenflow, a full sort of copy of it is in here. So for example, if I snip this to pieces and I delete these, the file is not gone. If I want the entire thing back, all I need to do is come here into the media bin, drag that, and there's the complete clip. So when in doubt about where your files are that you've pulled into this, at least for the purposes of editing, it's all here. And then a really handy extra that you can purchase for about $60 a year is Telestream's stock media library. This can come in really handy for virtual recitals or multimedia performances. You have access to, I think the number is literally about 500,000 stock images, videos, and sounds that you can incorporate into your videos royalty free, so you don't need to get any sort of permission. Like let's say I want to incorporate some kind of image. I'm just going to get rid of these text and annotations. So whenever, speaking of, whenever you want to get rid of something, all you have to do is click it and hit delete, and it's gone. So for example, this piece is Dance of the Marionettes. So let's see what happens if I type in marionettes. And this is quite extensive. You can type in, it seems like just about anything, and you'll get all kinds of options. So it looks like there is actually a marionette puppet show here. So I'm just gonna, all I have to do is drag that into the timeline. It might take a little time to load, but let's see what that looks like. Oh, this is actually a pretty cool puppet show. So say I want to turn this performance into a multimedia performance. I can position the video here, and let's say I want this video to come in, but I just want it to be sort of an overshadow so that we still see the student, but we see a bit of an outline here. I can go to the video settings, and like I showed you earlier, I would have to click this. I can change the opacity. Say I do a little bit of an overlay, but again, keep in mind this is over the student video in the timeline. So if I make this a little bit see-through, we're going to see the video underneath it. And let's say I want that to fade in. So I can create by right-clicking. I can add starting and ending transitions. And what that does is it adds sort of a fade in. Actually, I'll take a moment to show you that now. Looking at the timeline, if you want to make anything invisible or mute it, all you have to do is click these items all the way on the left. So you just click the eye to make it invisible. You click the little speaker symbol to mute it, just as I'm showing you this, this marionette video. Oh, hold on. I accidentally changed the opacity to 0. So here I have a transition in, gradual fade in, and then at the end I have a gradual fade out. And transitions are designated by these letters, and if you want to change that, all you have to do is double click it. And you have all of these options available to you. It's a little cut off on the screen, but you can select all kinds of transitions in or out or between videos. So for example, if I select flash and go with that, then the transition in is going to look more like this. But for now, I'm going to keep the original one. I just hit a Command Z, but that's just another handy feature. So let's say I want to get creative with this, and I want this marionette video to fade in, which I already have set up with the transition and transition in and transition out. And I want to make it kind of see-through. I want to make my student's video come through again, and we'll put it about here. Let's see what that looks like. So again, it'll fade in, it'll still be kind of see-through, and then it'll fade out. And that little marionette puppet just happened to be sort of in rhythm. That's a total coincidence that I'm secretly thrilled about. So as you can see, there's a ton of creative possibilities, and you're really only limited by your imagination. One more feature I want to show you quickly is transitions between videos. I showed you how to transition in and out of a standalone video. If you want one video to transition into another video, again, it's just as simple as taking one clip and dragging it over the other clip. So that little A-B thing there is the transition icon, and that automatically makes the transition between whatever length of video you have for the end of the previous one into the beginning of the next one This may or may not sound great, but this is what that transition would look like. And depending on how far you drag in, you'll have a longer or shorter transition. Again, it's the fade transition right now. So if we hit play here, still a transition, but it's just going to take a little longer to go from one to the next. And then when you're done editing up your video to send it places, all you need to do is go to File and then go to Export, and you have all of the sort of standard options for exporting your video. And if you want to publish it directly to somewhere, you can go to Publish To, like say I want to publish it to YouTube. It prompts me to do some settings, and I would sign into YouTube. And what this option does is it'll export the video and then it'll automatically upload it to your YouTube channel. As of today, there are some issues with it, with the latest update to Screenflow. They assure me they are working on it. It has something to do with the API connection that they're hoping to get solved soon. But once that is solved, you'll be able to export and upload directly to YouTube. In the meantime, it's just as easy to export the video to your desktop and then upload it to YouTube or send it wherever you need to go. So those are some of the basic features and slightly more advanced features of Screenflow that you need to get up and running for virtual recitals and video lessons that you want to put online. Hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions at all, please drop them in the comments below. Again, my name is Jonathan Roberts. If you found this helpful, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're working on all kinds of videos to help you figure out some tips and tricks in the virtual teaching universe. Thank you very much.